getting a couple of housekeeping items out of the way, attaching some brackets that I had laying around and such, we're into the real meat of the day, which is rudder pedals. You want to install them now, apparently, because access is better now, and that makes sense. All of this is going to get closed up pretty soon. To start, I did my usual. I stared at the plans, read the instructions. This takes about an hour to pull all the parts and try to envision how this thing's going together, and it's not as straightforward as you might think. We're going to start by fabricating the pedals themselves. We need some brackets. These things are a little more complicated than you'd think. And then bolting those together, we're going to fit it to the fuselage. There's some options as far as where we can install these depending on the height of the pilot. We'll make provisions to be able to adjust those later. Once we get them mocked into place and clamped up, we have a bracket that we need to alter and get it in there. And then after everything's been fabricated and installed, we'll pull it all out, knowing that it fits, but get it out of the way for some other items on the build. Let's get started. All right, so pedals. Pedals have some main parts. The pedal themselves, these brackets, which will attach the brakes. Now, I have both driver and passenger brakes, right and left brakes, and so I have two additional brackets. Some people may not have that. Let's clear up some impending confusion. I was under the mistaken impression that if you didn't have passenger side brakes, you would still have some pedals over there. But those pedals would be useless. In fact, the entire pedal is the brake pedal, not just the bracket. And if you don't have passenger side brakes, your rudder pedals on the passenger side will simply look like a weldment with a hoop on it. That hoop is the rudder pedal. Depends on if you added that option in your kit. To attach these pieces, we need some brackets cut from angle aluminum. So I'm going to start by cutting those brackets. It's unfortunate that we have to note, but I think it's important at this stage. If you notice, everything's got the blue plastic on it. We're not working with any laser cut parts. I am not fabricating anything that's later going to have to come off the plane. There's a lot of dimensions here, but all of this has been pre-punched. So in reality, I only really care about one right now, and that's that these brackets sit a ½ inch low of the pedal. Alright, I got the basics of one right-hand pedal done. That means I got 3 more, making sure to do rights and lefts. I'm going to set up shop and kind of assembly line this thing. all 4 pedals assembled, there's a lot of excess aluminum that we can cut off of these brackets. Now, Van says this is for weight savings. For me, it's less about the weight. It's more about just the enhanced finished look. So I'm gonna go ahead, do the extra credit, and get all these trimmed down, initially deburred, and we'll get them all put back together. The important part here is keeping everything labeled since they've all been match drilled now. So this is cool. We get a preview of not only the rudders, but the brakes and the whole system. Now I've got the left hand side mocked up here, and I'm gonna stop short of doing the right hand side. All of this has to be broken down so I can prep and prime these. And I don't know that it's necessary to have both sides completely done before test fitting this all in the plane. We're gonna rip it out anyways. I also made the mistake of putting the right hand pedals on the left hand side. But for that previously mentioned reason, all this has to come apart to be primed. I'm not overly concerned. Let's go see if it fits in the plane. All right, what an exciting step. We got our rudder pedals mocked up. They're just clamped in place for now, but man, it's cool seeing them here. I've been taking some time just staring at this, trying to figure out where to go next. I have some key steps I need to take. I need to get these things drilled into position, and there's about 3 positions that Vans recommends, or at least that are on the plan, so that you can adjust these pedals in the future depending on the height of the pilot. And I definitely want to have some adjustment there in the future. Once I get that set, I also have a middle support that I need to modify, and I need to put in place and transfer those same dimensions and same mounting locations to that piece. From there, I think everything comes out and goes on the shelf for a while, as it's not needed. We're just doing this step while I have such uninhibited access to both the top and bottom of where these mount. Getting all these positions in place, drilling all these holes, a little easier said than done. That's why I've sat here staring at it, and I think I got a pretty good beat on how to do it. Let's get started. All right, the first step, or my first step at least, is going to be to drill the blocks, the mounting blocks. And I'm not going to drill them to full size right away. I think I'm going to make this a little easier on myself if I do a pilot hole and put that same hole in the longerons where these mount to. I can then later open everything up to final size. And you'll see why I'm not going final size right from the get-go. But first, let's mark out where these mounting holes need to go and get them drilled. All right, now before I go drilling on these, it's important to point something out. On the plans, it shows that these are indeed drilled at an angle. Our fuselage tapers as it comes towards the nose, meaning this piece has to sit along that same taper angle, and in order to have a bar running perpendicular to the center line of the fuselage, anything that's going in like a hole like this is going to have that same taper angle. And so indeed, I cut a little piece of metal here that sort of replicates that tube. And if we align it to the bottom of this and the sides of this, you can see that it is at that same angle. So now I can mark what's forward on this, and that'll make sure that we don't wind up installing any of these backwards and can't figure out why things fit later on. Alright, so I got my markings for the holes. I've marked on the bottom of the blocks my holes, because if the hole wanders at all towards the top, that's not going to matter as much. The crucial dimension is where the bolt is going to exit the block and enter the longeron. And I want that to go right through the center of the longeron. Therefore, I want to make sure it goes right through the center of the bottom of my block. I have all my brackets pre-drilled, and I have the center one, which has through holes, actually cut in half. And that's so that we can encapsulate that bar between the two rudder pedals. There will be a washer added between these two to make up for the kerf of that blade, so don't worry about that. With all these pieces cut, I guess it's back to the plane. Alright, I got this clamped in place, and the best way I could figure out to do it is actually these squeeze clamps. They worked out pretty well. Now here is the reason why I started with the number 30. It's because I happen to have a long number 30 for my right angle drill. That'll allow me to get in here, just barely pop above that longeron with a pilot hole in all the different positions. Then I can worry about going back and widening them all to a number 10. Alright, now the pedals need to go back in so I can figure out what in the world is going on with this middle support. Alright, so this is our bracket, our support bracket for the middle of these pedals. And this section needs to come out to make room for stiffeners on the firewall. Now the weird part is it doesn't say on our plans exactly how much needs to come out. It says that we can take up to 1 3/8 inch off the already cut out part, but there's no dimension from the firewall to the end of this. I'm comfortable simply measuring it and multiplying it by 2 for this half scale drawing and going from there, because truly it doesn't need to be exact. Alright, like with everything, we want to start with a hole in the corner so that our corner is rounded. So I'll drill that out and take it over to the bandsaw, trim this up. We'll go see how it looks on the plane. position all mapped out. Now, I've got it aligned with some drill bits up here and made a little Franken clamp that is squeezing it together in the middle. I've done my best to position everything so that this bracket is perpendicular to the firewall, though it's sort of free to flap about a little bit. From here, I think the first thing I want to do is get the holes that will rivet it to the firewall plate, being sure to dodge adjacent rivets. That's noted in the instructions. That way I can cleco it and then worry about the mount itself up top. Alright, all the holes are drilled. However, right at the end I realized something quite unfortunate. On the side blocks, I made it so the forwardmost and aftmost position of the rudders would share a hole, meaning the aftmost bolt on the forwardmost position becomes the forwardmost bolt on the aftmost position. That's all fine and dandy, except the spacing of the bolts is slightly different on this middle brace. They're squeezed outward just about 1/8 of an inch. And so obviously that bolt alignment no longer works. And now I've got these two center bolts that are awfully close to one another. In fact, when I go to final size of a number 10, there's just going to be a tiny little bit of material between the two. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think they'll still function as a guide for the rudders, but it is a little bit unfortunate. I got the garage picked up, cleaned up a little bit. It was getting out of control. Now's about the time where these parts can be set aside for a while, I think, until the plane and everything that I've been working on is built and we flip it back over and we install them. However, I've been clecoing crap to this fuselage for a long time. I haven't built anything for far too long. I think this is a great chance to get ahead a little bit with respect to the rudder pedals and just finish them now. So I'm going to take them apart, I'm going to debur them, and I'm going to go through and go ahead and prime them and rivet them back together. That way this whole unit is complete, and when the time is right, I can just bolt it in. I don't have to worry about doing this stuff. So let's get to it. Now, to be honest, I don't think these needed to be installed and assembled in order to fit them to the fuselage. I think when the instructions were talking about assembling these, they were more thinking of final assembly, much like I'm going to be doing in a moment here. And even more honesty, transparency here, I don't know how advisable it is to be painting these or priming these. I do know that it won't be long before we wear back down to this aluminum, but they'll look good for a while, and if I need to replace them in a matter of years, I can. long edges that often use the bench grinder for, this thing makes real short work of. I can only imagine how perfect it is for pieces that are too big to bring to the table, bringing the tool to the work instead. Things like skins or even just larger structural members, it makes these edges so easy to deburr. Hey, so a slight modification here to the priming process. Everything's the same, but I'm gonna go ahead and give hanging the parts a try. I think it's gonna solve a number of problems for me. The first is labeling the parts. So this blue pen bleeds real bad on the white, and normally that's not a problem, we can hide it. But on these interior parts where it might not be that easy to hide and that bleed is really prominent, I'm gonna be able to label the wire that all the parts are hanging from, and I can have the parts completely absent of any part number or left, right insignia, anything like that. The second is I can get coats on all sides, let it kick for about a half an hour, hit it with that second coat, and then that should be it. That removes a lot of the flipping, drying, flipping, drying, flipping, drying. So I'm gonna give this a whirl on these pedals. I think if it works out well, it's gonna work really good on all these small interior parts and brackets and stiffeners that we're gonna have to do soon here for the fuselage. So the parts have cured. I'd say like 80% of the way there. Not great. For rudder pedals, I think they look fantastic, but I'm keeping in mind that I really got to get my skills up for the interior of the plane. And I think after a few more sessions of this, I'll really have it down, and I'll be plenty happy with the truly visible parts of the cockpit of the aircraft. I'm going to go ahead and take these pedals down one at a time to keep the parts straight and just start assembling them and get this whole system built. Again, these look pretty good. You can tell there's, I think, one or two parts I didn't manage to get two coats on. I wasn't as consistent as I should have been, and I sort of knew that going through it. But these are brackets that are on the back side of the rudder pedal. I wasn't overly concerned. What is interesting is you can see a distinct difference between one coat and two coats. One looks satin and milky, and the other looks bright white and glossy. That bright white and glossy is what we want for the cabin, for the interior of the plane. And so I know how to achieve it. It's just a matter of being consistent. One other small misstep is I didn't countersink these. For some reason I was thinking we had universal head rivets, but I do want to be careful countersinking everything with this fresh primer. I got all my pedals. I'm gonna go ahead and get them assembled. I'll stop just short of putting in the cotter pins into the castle nuts. I do want those in before I bolt the pedals in, so I'm not stuck underneath a dashboard of sorts trying to get those in, but I think it's a little premature now. Otherwise, I'm gonna get these things all built out and see how they look. Okay, I'm sure it surprises no one that I just couldn't wait to get this mocked up, but it's really cool. Let's take a closer look. So the pedals, rudder, and brake are mounted on two separate axes on the van's RV7, as most of their planes, or I think all of their planes. And that creates some interesting geometry. First, we need to make sure the neutral point, and this will be done when I install them, has it so that the bottom of the pedals are all lined up. That way you don't have one foot in front of the other in a neutral position. But that means that your neutral point on your brakes needs to be slightly different to account for that, so that your feet still feel flat against the pedals. Which means if you look, this one is actually tilted back at an angle to account for that. And that's all done predetermined by the geometry in this linkage from Vans. It's actually really nice. It makes getting these set up pretty simple. You still do want to verify when drilling your holes and setting all this up and putting your bolts in. But for me, it all lined up pretty well. You can see that while one pedal is in front of the other and one pedal is actually angled back compared to the other, if you take your foot and put it on each, it's actually in the same position and in the same place. I've even gone so far as to mock up the center brace. And you'll remember that I had to drill this into position, and this will go against the firewall. But it too fits great. And now we can see we've got range of motion in our rudders, and we got brakes that, well, will work once we get all the plumbing done. I couldn't be more excited about this. I feel like I'm always saying that, but this stuff is just so cool. This is gonna get set aside for now until final assembly of the cockpit area. So I'm gonna go ahead and unclamp it and just put it on a shelf.